I'm Victoria Vasilkiv. I am the coordinator recently to this program, and I'll start us off with a few housekeeping items. We have time for discussion at the end, but feel free to ask questions or comment in the chat at any time. To use the chat box, you'll click the chat button below at the bottom of your screen, and where the text says type message here, you can send a message to anybody in the meeting or filter to a specific person like myself from the drop-down menu. If you have any trouble with Zoom, please feel free to message me directly at any time and I will walk you through. We have auto transcription enabled, so you should see closed captionings for this session. If you want to toggle this off or on at any time, you can do so by pressing the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. This series is accredited by the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada as a group learning activity, and it may be eligible for credits towards requirements of other professional bodies such as the College of Pharmacists of Manitoba and the College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba. If you'd like to receive credit for your attendance, make sure your name is fully shown in your account name. You can rename yourself by clicking right on where your video is shown and select rename, or by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of your screen and finding your name and hovering over it, then select more where you can see the option to rename yourself. We will be sharing a link to the recording on YouTube and the slides with everybody who has registered for this session. And now I'd like to turn it over to our speakers today, Dr. Cara Brown and Trish Rothorn, who will introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm going to do the thing now where I take a minute to get ourselves organized. Do you see the correct view now, Victoria? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Hello. So thank you so much for the invitation to come present today. My name is Cara Brown. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Occupational Therapy in the College of Rehabilitation Sciences. And I was a PrEP award winner, I think in 2020 or so. And that got me started on this journey, looking at evaluation of public research engagement. And I'm very pleased. The team members are on the screen here. And I'm very grateful that I have Patricia Rothorn with me here today to present with me. And extra kudos because I did not ask her in as a timely fashion as I should have. So I really appreciate how flexible she's being to be here with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Great. Thanks, Cara. My name is Trish Rothorn. I am one of the lived experience researchers, or what we'll refer to in brief as LEARS. I've enjoyed being on this project. It's dear to my heart, having a background in healthcare. And also I use most of my time right now as a retired person engaging with shared health and other organizations like CIHR.
Great. So our other team members on the slide here, Patty Till, Rebecca Ganan, and Aya are representing researchers, and Simone, Trish, and Gail, and Teresa. So I wanted to acknowledge that I live, work, and play as an uninvited guest in Treaty 1 territory. This is a picture of Assiniboine Forest. It's the land of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, Lakota, Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Red River Métis people. And our presentation is going to talk about the importance of including and listening to less heard voices. And as we saw from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, this is essential for ongoing healing and advancement of well-being across Turtle Island. So today we're going to talk a bit about some of the advantages and challenges of engagement. And this is an early phase of a research project. And we're going to talk about how we use the Valuing All Voices model, which is a Manitoba-made model, to design and evaluate the engagement in the project.
We want to clarify the term we use for patient researchers in this presentation. We did not want to use the term patient. We also thought that the term public researchers refers to involving the general public in your research planning and implementation. It does not honor the specific experience of someone who has experience as a healthcare consumer. Therefore, we will use the term lived experience researchers in this presentation to refer to people, including people in your research that have direct experience with the topic. We might sometimes use the abbreviation LEARS.
So just a little bit of context to how this project came about. As I mentioned earlier, we received a prep award. And this was really to help with this development of the initial engagement plan. And so I was really grateful for this award to bring this to my attention, to make this more a formal part of how I do my work, because it's been something I had been wanting to do. And so this part helped with recruiting and providing orientation to our lived experience researchers. And then that prompted, I think that was really a great catalyst for us to receive a CIHR patient-oriented research grant. And that really provided us with the opportunity to have a really fulsome development and implementation of an engagement evaluation plan. So this is just about designing the evaluation plan. So when we designed the evaluation plan for this research project, we took two main models or frameworks into account to design the evaluation plan. The first is the Valuing All Voices model, which I mentioned is a Manitoba model, and it was originally in a paper by Shimon and colleagues, and then Roche and colleagues kind of expanded on it and involved public researchers to refine that model. That model really talks about trauma-informed intersectionality. And so that was a really important concept that we used in our planning and implementation of our lived experience researcher engagement. And then on the right, we have the GRIP, GRIP 2, which is more of a checklist. And this is the short form of the checklist. The full checklist is very long. And really, it kind of helps you make sure you don't forget anything when you're developing your engagement plan. It helps you think through each step of the research, how you should think about and where you should think about involving the lived experience researchers. So that's really what I used it for, was to make sure we were being considering all aspects of engagement along the way in the process.
This slide provides a wide overview of the project. The research project aim was to develop a research proposal related to improving care for older adults with care transitions from hospital to home. The project started in January 2020, when the lived experience researchers were first recruited, as depicted with the gray box. There was a lived experience research orientation in person prior to the pandemic in February of 2020. The pandemic delayed the workshops where the development of the proposal took place. There were 5 workshops to meet the objective of developing a proposal as depicted by the turquoise boxes. The team also determined that an equity approach was important to this project. And we had 2 meetings to develop the justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion statement as depicted by the orange boxes. A component of the evaluation is also shown here in the dark blue boxes. The lived experience researchers were interviewed before, during, and after the proposal writing process to hear their perspective on how they wanted to be engaged and how they were engaged in the project. To provide more information on the leaders in the project, the leaders were recruited through a seniors support organization and the Manitoba Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research Support Unit. All 5 of us had experience with going from home to hospital or being a caregiver of someone. Going home from hospital. The experience motivated me to engage in this project to inform healthcare providers of the gaps in the system and hopefully improve post-hospital care. And the 5 of us were of different ages. Some of us worked, some of us did not. One was retired, and we had different levels of educational attainment and income.
So the lived, the research orientation for the leaders was a way for them to get to know each other, learn more about the research topic itself, and think about their role as leaders. I had hoped that it would prompt relationships between the lived experience researchers, since we had 5 of them, that would allow them to support each other in and between research meetings. But the change to Zoom made that something that we didn't get to find out if that was true or not. The concept of trauma-informed intersectionality was introduced in this orientation to make sure that the lived experience researchers understood we were working to create an inclusive and supportive environment where all experiences are honored and that we recognize the potential for bringing up past trauma. So this is really important when we talk about transitions and hospital, transitions from hospital and hospital care, because that can be often bringing back up a traumatic experience. And we had discussions, questions that I put there on the slide to support thinking about everyone's personal expertise and how people thought we could help them to be supported in the process. So what do you feel you bring to the project? How do you want to participate, and how can we help you participate?
The next step in the project was the full team research workshops. Excuse me. Our team for our engagement project included 14 people. This included 5 leaders, 3 policymakers, 6 researchers or policy experts, 5 active or former clinicians from 5 professions, and 1 direct care manager. This totals more than 14 because many of the members had multiple roles, excuse me, at the same time. We worked together for 14 months. This does not include the year interruption during the COVID pandemic. We had a tentative workshop plan developed in advance. We worked together in 5 Zoom workshops to develop a research proposal. Cara prepared each workshop with a professional facilitator. After each workshop, discussion and feedback was collated and used to plan for the next workshop.
So sometimes it's nice to see like exactly how people do things. So this might be more detail than some people need, but some people might appreciate that. So this is just kind of what our objectives were for the 5 workshops. So at first we were looking at the relationship building piece. So forming the team and establishing our direction. We developed some guiding principles about how we wanted to work together. Develop consensus on the research question and direction. The second workshop, we needed to get consensus on those principles we had started working on and refine our research objectives. The third workshop got more into kind of the methods, so figuring out our population, our methods. The fourth one focused on data collection strategies and recruitment strategies. And also we did a check-in about, when we developed this proposal, what is everyone's role? And the 5th one was really just more of a debrief and wrap up. How did we work together, and how do we want to work together going forward?
We added 2 meetings to the plan to develop justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion statement for the research project. These were attended by a self-selected smaller group that included 9 team members, 3 of which were leaders.
So turning now, that gives you some context, turning now to evaluating our engagement strategy. There's lots of models to guide when, how, and why to engage the public and individuals with lived experience in research. But there isn't so much literature on using these models to evaluate. That's been seen as a gap. And so we decided to have these as our evaluation questions. And we wanted to use existing models to address this gap of there being a lot of models, but not a lot out about, what it's like to use them. So we wanted to know, how can we support the LEAR engagement during the project? So we wanted to be getting feedback in the project so we could adjust our engagement strategy. Then we also wanted to know kind of more of at the end of the project, what ended up being the level of engagement of the lived experience researchers? And did they have an impact on what actually happened in developing the research proposal? Was it a meaningful engagement or not? So I'll walk through this slide. That's a little bit busy here. This is showing all the different data sources we used to explore if the LEARs felt engaged. So we used that valuing all, we wanted to know if they felt engaged, and we used the valuing all voices model. And then we also looked at what the impact was. So the different data sources we have were the interviews with the LEARs. So we interviewed them before that first orientation session, so before anything began. In the middle, between the middle, what workshops we had, and at the end after the 5th workshop. We used the PEAT, which is a engagement survey. It has a combination of closed-ended and open-ended questions. And it ranks it on a scale. And instead of looking at the actual number, which would be skewed because we had been developing these relationships, and it might be hard for someone to say, like, yeah, that was a terrible part of it. I looked at, which scores were the highest and which scores were the lowest, so that I could identify what are the strengths and what are some things to work on. Something that was unique that we did is that we recorded those research workshops that we had with the team where we were developing the proposal. And we used that to look for examples, like what literally was done to embrace this idea of valuing all voices and use a trauma-informed intersectionality approach where your priority is to reduce hierarchy, bring in unheard voices, and try to increase safety for everybody. And the workshops also helped us see who made what suggestions, and then what suggestions were picked up and kept, so that we could look at what that impact was. And then I also had all the workshop documents, which were also helpful for me to track what the impact was. So who made what suggestions and what suggestions stayed. So we'll talk about the results of our evaluation. We're first going to talk about the level of engagement. So did we manage to do what we wanted to do in terms of being inclusive and increasing safety and valuing all voices? So I already talked a little bit about this model, but just to reiterate that it reframes the central goal of patient engagement in health research as a matter of health equity and social justice. So in the next slides, we'll talk about each component of the Valuing All Voices framework. I'll first talk a little bit about what the goal is for each of those categories as I understand it. And then Trish will talk about, how we did in that area. So the first component is relationship building. And the goals are to have a warm and welcoming environment, to acknowledge power imbalances, to look for opportunities to embrace resistance. You're looking to have the team showing an understanding of different cultural practices and, I would say, ways of knowing and thinking. You're looking for team members to be open and willing to self-disclose. And this process, of course, takes time for relationship building.
Oopsie. The evaluation, oh, sorry, Karen.
Yeah, you go ahead.
The evaluation indicated the relationship building was strong in this group. Effective strategies for relationship building were that Cara connected personally with every leader individually before they made a commitment to the project, and learning about the needs of the leader to engage us fully in the project.
I have a few more notes for that one, but Trish, do you want me to go through them?
Okay, I only have a note for the 22. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
We both have the same notes, so I'll finish that one.
Okay.
Some of the other things that were effective was validating their experience in the initial interviews. So in those evaluation interviews, they also were helpful to be a way to validate their experiences before the research project began. Formatting the workshops with icebreakers and closing exercises where all team members were asked to share something more personal. It set the stage for diffusing power and hierarchy. Using an external professional facilitator who was involved in the development of the Valuing All Voices framework. And some things that were identified for improvement were that we could have talked more overtly about power and power imbalance. So the workshops were designed to diffuse power, but it probably would have been even more effective to just have a discussion about it as a team. There was different levels of engagement from different team members. So for example, during the pandemic was a really difficult time for some policymakers to be present in everything that they wanted to. And so while we understand it, that lack of engagement was noticed and does make a difference. And it was hard to make sure all team members felt included when we got to more technical discussions about policy and research design. So the next piece is education and communication. That's the next component of the model. And what you're aiming to do is to educate the leaders about the process of research, ensure follow-up and the impact, and make sure that there's clear messaging about the impact of the work. And ways to do this are to use different modes of communication for different needs and audiences, and engage early in the research project with the leaders.
A variety of strategies were used for education and communication. The initial interview prepared the leaders for communicating with the research team by having them tell their story and encouraging them to think about how their story would help inform the research. In the initial interviews, the leaders communicated how they could best be supported. We wanted to be prepared for the meetings regarding both content and process. We asked for a variety of different communication options so that we wouldn't feel pressured to only provide feedback verbally in meetings. Another effective strategy was encouraging education from the leaders as well as the researchers. For example, learning about the experience of the health services from a First Nations leader. There were also some challenges. In the mid-interview, the leaders said that they needed more information on project progress. This did allow Cara to adjust the project communication strategy to address this concern. It can be challenging to differentiate between supporting a project as a leader and being in the research project as a participant.
The next component of the model is self-awareness. So the goal is to understand oneself in order to acknowledge unearned advantage and counter bias. And it includes practicing critical reflexivity, assessing one's liabilities and assets, recognizing we are all works in progress on journeys of health or recovery, understanding our own place on our journey and knowing our own triggers, and being aware of power and knowledge imbalances.
The valuing of all voices model focuses more on the self-reflection needed by the researchers. However, our evaluation indicated that Lear self-reflection was valuable for supporting teamwork. In the pre-project interview, the Lears reflected on how they could personally contribute to the project. This self-awareness allowed the researchers to support the Lears as best they could. For example, taking into consideration their communication and time needs and being aware of the past trauma that could potentially be triggered. We developed working together guidelines. This reflective process helped us to determine how could we best work together. We had one team member review all the workshop recordings, provide feedback to the primary facilitators on any processes that she thought should be adjusted in the next workshop. The last workshop focused on discussing how we work together and how we would like to work together in future. Challenges included team members not being sure how to handle their multiple roles. For example, leaders who had worked in healthcare or providers who were also caregivers. We should really have directly invited people to bring their full self to the table. Finally, it was always a challenge to know how best to address team members with less interest in engaging in reflexivity.
The next component of the model is understanding and acceptance. This is about listening and valuing all perspectives in order to gain appreciation for others' feelings. It's about empowerment rather than enabling, acceptance rather than tolerance, and sharing and hearing each other's stories.
Understanding and acceptance was displayed in the very early stages of the engagement, especially in the interview where the leaders could tell their story in their own way and were validated that this was important expertise to bring to the project. Identifying diversity as a priority helped to make the values of the team overt. All perspectives and stories were validated when told in the workshops, and storytelling was positively reinforced by all members. Allowing people to communicate in a way that worked for them demonstrated acceptance for the different ways of being. One leader said, "The sharing of information is respect." An area of development for the facilitators to identify was stories with less relevance in order to reinforce the purpose of the work, instead of equally validating all stories.
And the next component is trust. The trust component of the model is ensuring that everyone feels safe and supported. This includes cultivating openness and honesty, assuming the best intentions when people appear to be acting difficult or challenging, the development of two-way reciprocal relationships, and having accountability and confidentiality.
Trust was the sum of all of the other components of the model. Over the course of the project, we noted a growth in relationships, increased vulnerability of team members, and received feedback that the leaders felt safe, supported, and heard. The leaders were shown how their feedback was being used and were acknowledged for their time and expertise, financially as well as verbally. One challenge was how to make impact when our research project proposal was not funded. To address this, we wrote and published an op-ed to bring attention to the research issue. Another thing that we heard in the evaluation was there was still some missing voices of our team. This included male leaders, the old, and the Indigenous researcher.
So I'm going to shift gears now. I should have had a transition slide here. So just imagine maybe a blank slide in your head for a minute. So that was about looking at the level of engagement using the Valuing All Voices framework. And now I'm going to talk about the evaluation related to the impact. So the LEARs were included in all the workshops. Did they have any impact? So our evaluation suggests that they did have impact in several areas. Of course, we can't know, we don't necessarily know if there was even more impact to be had that we missed out on, but this is the areas of impact that we noted in our analysis. The original research proposal was looking at how teams can support care transitions, and the patient researchers, along with the policymakers, very quickly asked for a shift in this focus to be looking at the individuals themselves receiving care, and we did make that shift. They were essential in championing this focus on equity and the development of the JEDI statement. Lots and lots of suggestion, and this is really strong in the literature, that they had a lot of input about inclusive and respectful language. They challenged frequently made assumptions. So an example of that is we had a real mix of folks who have very little social supports and those who have more social supports. And so, you know, not assuming that everybody has a person that can help them when they go home from hospital, that some people don't have those social supports. So always bringing that back up when we were forgetting things like that. Grounding the team to focus on the day-to-day experience of people in our research focus. Identified the importance of looking at issues of power in the healthcare system, which led to us adopting a model that does include power in its way of looking at interactions in the healthcare system, and helped identify important participant characteristics when we were deciding on the sample. So as Trish indicated earlier, after all this work, it was so disappointing that we were unsuccessful with the funding application. And this raised a lot of questions for me about, okay, now what, so what, how do we make this meaningful? Of course, you always try again, but it felt like, you know, research sometimes moves very slowly, felt like something needed to be done more immediately. And so Carolyn was helpful at suggesting that we publish an op-ed, which we did. It was published in the Free Press. And then I got one more bite from the media from that article, and we got quoted in one other article. We're now running a pilot project, so a smaller version of our funds so that we can keep moving forward. And we continue to include the LEARs in that. So we're working on publishing this work that we presented today, and they're helping with the pilot project. So piloting our interview, reviewing the consent form, some things like that. It is, of course, important to say that, you know, this has been a long project, and so we have lost some of our LEARs over time. And I think, you know, someone moved, someone has a different role. And so it gives an opportunity to look for other people, again, look at the diversity of the team and maybe do some targeted recruitment for having more LEARs on the team if we feel that we need that.
Hi, Cara. Just a friendly reminder, for 10 minutes you asked.
Our timing is perfect. I love it.
Awesome.
So the title was Lessons Learned. I said I would say some lessons learned, so I'm sure you heard them throughout, but just to reiterate, that I did appreciate that this, this opportunity for continual and reflective process evaluation to support authentic leader engagement, because I think sometimes in research we're in a rush to get to the next deadline, to get something produced, and so having this funding to do this purposeful reflective evaluation, I think, was a really great opportunity. And we did have the limitations of the pandemic and Zoom, and considering all that, taking this purposeful approach really helped. So it was really interesting to get to look at the Valuing All Voices framework and think about it. It really helped with that thoughtful design of engagement. It provided that language to talk about inclusiveness and have that be very overt with everybody on the team. Really appreciated that. I think the intent of the Valuing All Voices model is that it applies to everybody on the team. And maybe it's just my lens, because when I read it, when I initially read it, I was thinking about, of course, myself and, the things that I should be doing to value all voices. And as I used it more and did the evaluation, it was just so clear that the leaders doing all those things too, being self-reflective, just was enhanced that engagement so much. So by the leaders being self-reflective, they could express what they needed so that they could be supported. The waxing and waning of engagement. And so just accepting that not everybody's going to engage in the same way, and that's all right. We had some people who just reviewed the meeting notes and gave feedback. We had people that had phone calls in between workshops to give verbal feedback. We had someone who only came when they could, and it was still so valuable to have those folks. And I think there was a lot of talk of leaders feeling guilty or like feeling bad when they couldn't come. So something I've been thinking about is how to set expectations around that. So obviously a lot of them are caregivers, and they're not going to be able to engage maybe that they feel like they should, and finding ways to normalize that. And then this project also again had me think about research impact in a different way, and I think it really prompted me to do some knowledge translation that I sometimes shy away from. And so having people that want to see impact and want to see change really pushed to do that op-ed that I wouldn't have normally done on my own. So that was a great benefit of having the leader engagement. I think my biggest learning was that by setting the stage purposefully, it gave, maybe it would just happen to be the 5 people we had, but I feel like that was important in empowering the leaders to feel comfortable in speaking up for what they needed. Trish, do you have anything that you wanted to, sorry to put me, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. Is there anything you wanted to say about your lesson learned from you?
Well, I think it really is kudos to yourself, because you're an inclusive person. And I've been on many other projects where it's been very directed, and people who are engaging in it and giving their feedback are given a short shrift, if you know what I mean. It's you provided help, and you sought help when you needed to get other people's perspective in this, to make sure that it was on the way. But the real problem now is going to be transitions from hospital to home. Not many people are being kept in hospital, I can assure you. I know people who have spent 4 hours post having their surgery and recovering, and 4 hours later they're out. So I am worried about loss to the community. I'm worried about loss of physicians and follow-up, and what's going to happen there. So that's just my voice from being a patient, recently discharged within 24 hours of an EVAR surgery, which is a very different surgery than open surgery. But It's something we need to consider, what the voices are of those people who are living the experience as a patient.
Yeah, thanks for that, Trish. And it's, you know, the lived experience researchers didn't necessarily join this project because they wanted to be part of a lived experience evaluation. So I also am just so thankful of how they've embraced this part of the project too, which I think has been really valuable. We've done a lot of education and presentations like this, talking about the importance of lived experience researcher engagement. And so it is exciting that we're moving on to our pilot now. After quite a long time, to have a little bit of funding so we can put this work into action and hopefully highlight some of the issues, and maybe I'm hoping that will shed light on ways that we need to address things from a community and primary care side, because hospital stays are so short. So yeah, thank you for that. That's it. We'd love to hear any comments or answer any questions if we didn't provide you with enough context or anything like that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cara and Trish, and thanks for sharing so much of your experience with us. Anyone, is welcome to ask questions in the chat or unmute themselves and ask directly. I'll start off by reading a few comments in the chat. So Sue said, great terminology on lived experience researchers, very person-centered and nicely aligns with occupational therapy perspectives that view the person at the center and key focus. And the other question we got in the chat now is from Kathy, who said, would love to be able to read your op-ed, and can you share it with everybody?
Yeah, I can find that link. You might need to subscribe to the free press, depending on how many times you've read free already.
Got nothing else right now, so you are welcome to unmute or put your hand up and we'll call you. Doesn't sound like it. I'll give it a minute in case anybody's typing anything.
I'm just grabbing that link. I'll put that in for you.
Perfect. All right.
I was just gonna say, Cara and Trish, it was so nice to see how the Valuing All Voices framework was used in an evaluation. That was really exciting.
I was a little nervous talking about it in front of you. It's very, it's your own and my own interpretation of some of it, right?
Awesome. I see Ashley's hand up.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Hi, Cara. Yeah, I agree. It was really nice to see that framework used in evaluation because it's something that we think about as well in our work. I was just wondering, and I might have just missed it, but you mentioned that the transcripts or the videos from the meetings were reviewed by somebody, and I was just wondering, was that a researcher, was that a Lear, or who was doing that?
Yeah, so Patty Till did that. So she's on the research team. And she, her research area is around stigma. And so she has training in discourse analysis, which she would say that's not exactly what she did. She didn't use discourse analysis, but she used that frame of looking at how things are said and what order they're said. But she was a lot more pragmatic and concrete in this analysis than she normally would. But we literally wanted to pull like some examples, like how do you do this, right? I have the benefit of having my occupational therapy background, which really helps me in this area around listening to all voices and validating and that type of thing. If I was a different kind of researcher, I might not have that. So we thought that really might be a helpful addition to the literature, providing some examples, like how is it actually done? So that's what we're working on now. just filling in that last piece in our manuscript that we hope to publish.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so we also did it as a so we did that as a final evaluation, but she did that each time. So she would read the transcript, and then I would connect with her. And then of course I was working with a CHI facilitator, and she would say, like, I noticed this. And, you know, often it was really just validating what I had felt in the moment. So actually that was the most helpful for me, it was like, I noticed this, and I would think like, yeah, I kind of was noticing that too. So that helps me know that I should maybe approach that a little bit differently, or that's something that we should pay attention to for next time. And I wish I could think of an example off the top of my head for you right now, but I can't think of one. I'll see if I can think of one.
Okay, thanks. That's really interesting.
Trish.
One of the things that I really did like and enjoyed and put people on the same level was the initial, this is who we are. We're all in this all together. The exercises that we did, you know, in supporting each other in the beginning and those at the end, you know, what is your most favorite season? Just brought the team together as being on an equal footing, which is very good because of the power struggle between, you know, healthcare administrators and, you know, are we being evaluated for what we say? And, you know, there's that aspect of healthcare where we don't share a lot of information because of fear, you know, so being able to share that, be open within the safety of this group was very good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thank you to the Center for Healthcare Innovation facilitators that helped us with those icebreakers and those wrap-ups.
Yeah.
And that also brings up another point that didn't make it into the presentation. And what was it? Oh, it was that I had deliberately designed it so that we didn't have like researcher separate meetings and lived experience separate meetings. It was specifically designed for everyone to be involved in everyone, except for me and the research kind of coordinators and assistants. And I'm still not sure what I would do next time. I would maybe do mostly that with maybe one or two, like maybe one researcher only meeting and one lived experience researcher meeting. When you get to the middle, when you get to the what method, you know, what theory are we, you know, what's the theoretical framework, or, you know, what's the sampling frame, you know, I felt like if you were just very transparent about why you were doing that mid process, that maybe it would be worth it. But having, you know, a bunch of sessions before that sets the stage for evaluating all expertise. I think I would do that first though, but then maybe one separate one, I think, is where I'm at now, because you just, you know, there's obviously disadvantages and advantages to those different approaches.
Mm.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Cara and Trish. Thank you for your time and sharing your experience with us. And I think we'll wrap it up here. I am going to pop an evaluation link in the chat. If you would be so kind to let us know what you thought of this session, and also let us know if you have any ideas for future things we should talk about here. All right, thank you all, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.